we have to prove, I think, to the province that we are an aging, Norfolk is aging slightly faster than the rest of the province. So with that, we have to make sure that anything we're promoting, such as a senior center, we need this many now, and in the future we need this many. Also, just general numbers, growth numbers. Norfolk's population will grow in certain segments, so we're going through the demolition or the demographics of that and which groups are moving ahead, and we'll make sure that anything we're putting in this application matches with that. We're not going to put something in that makes, you know, if our 5 to 16-year-olds aren't growing presently, we're going to make sure that that is accounted for and then that our application makes sense. The asset management plan, Mr. Jordan Sanger here is our expert on that. He's been a real workhorse through this. Again, we have to make sure that our asset management plan is in there, and again, it has to match with the application itself. Recreational programming plan. That is a finer refinement of our master rec plans. What we want to do with that, it may be a professional service we are in contact with to bring somebody to look at how much our pool is used, where our gaps are, see where our arenas are used, where the gaps are, and to put this together. We also then look at what a new facility and what we offer in it may fill some of those gaps. So for instance, we know we have, our seniors are growing, so if we have the pool with the warm water aquafit pool, we're estimating a certain percent, we'll get a certain percent more of the population of Norfolk County coming. And we know that because we're turning people down daily at the pool, for instance. However, we need to refine that and show, here are, you know, maybe it's a 10 to noon sort of thing where we have openings, and this individual will help us with that. Again, it strengthens our application of why we don't just need the pool. We need a 5-lane or 4-lane 25-meter. We need the 8-lane 25-meter or the 50-meter pool, that sort of thing. A climate lens is, this is, I believe, is looking at, maybe Chris could help me here, I always stumble on this. This is looking at the Leeds building, greenhouse gas emissions, that sort of thing. So again, we have to look at getting rid of some facilities and moving to the new where the reduction in that is, and that's quite a process on its own. And then the community employment benefits is something a lot of municipalities we talk to haven't did this. And I think some of the rules have changed, but we're looking at how many construction jobs immediately for this over the 3, 4, 5 years we build. And also we have to look at our own staffing somewhat. Will we need more folks for our concession stands? Will we need more folks for programming? Which we may not. We have to refine about what we're going to put into this. But that's a big part too, to show that there is a benefit to employment to the area. And I think the bigger that number is, the more people, the better that is at selling our application. So as much as the application is a big piece of work, these here are just as big and may be bigger in places. This, we've kind of tried to get some numbers. 50 million is the grant. If maybe a conversation for the county or for council, if they want a $68 million facility, we can, if we are lucky and we get secured 50 million, that other 18 has to come from the county. So that's we won't dwell on, but that is the decision. And when we do some rough numbers now with what it costs, because obviously a gymnasium space and office space is a lesser square dollar per foot than arenas, which are lesser yet than the aquatic side, we have to flesh out what exactly we want, and we can apply some of these numbers to that. But at present, staff feel we're only looking at probably 125,000 square foot facility. And again, until this fleshed out, but these are what we're going on, the 125,000 square feet, working the numbers we have. November 12th is the deadline for the application. We're hoping to have a final application 1 week before. There are a lot of set of eyes on this as we go through, but if we've got that week, and again, I don't know how it works, but maybe we want to run it by council, again, run it by RFAB, maybe some other groups out there or another professional in the area that's not here at the table, just to get their ideas, because we do very competitive and we have to put our best foot forward, so as many eyes as possible. So we're hoping a week from the 12th to have what we consider a final draft and some more circulation before we submit at 11:59 on November 12th. So with that, any questions? I mean, in lieu of actually going through the application, I think all the committee members, I think, have seen the application. And we would just to stress to you that we are going through it. We're also in touch with Eva Salter, who is with the province, and she works with all groups, giving general questions and answers and things like that we're moving ahead with. So I think as staff, we're definitely a team effort, and we're reaching out to everybody we can for information on this. Other than showing you the application where we are, we're on it, and it's a big job.
Questions? I'd like to just identify who's the OPI, the Office of Primary Interest for the application. Is it you, Bill, or is it you, Chris, or is it who's taking control of the whole package?
I believe Mr. Chris's signature will go on the application, but obviously as CEO, he is giving great insight, and he is at almost every meeting that he can attend with us. But I think because it is a rec facility, a lot of this is falling on myself to orchestrate with the team we have around.
Okay. Can we just jump back 2 slides to your 7-bullet list of supporting documents?
Shannon, do you know how to go back here? You got a piece of... Okay. Have to go right. So just go one at a time.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to identify, who's hitting the business case, who's handling each of these supporting documents for this. So that, for instance, I know JJ is very, very interested in the climate lens aspect of this. So is there somebody he can get together with to make sure that that is fully fleshed out? Things like that.
Through the chair, probably because even with the business case, all players have a section in the business case. And as far as the climate lens, I would suggest if JJ wanted to get a hold of myself, I would just put him in charge or in connection with Mike, our energy person, or I might go through the acting GM Jason Godby, and then that way we're using Michael's time as efficiently as possible and set the meetings up. So.
Okay, so if anybody on the board has a specific area of expertise or area of interest that they really want to delve into in these supporting documents, they're going to go through you to get teed up?
Through the chair. I think that would be the smoothest, and then we're united going forward, and we know who's meeting with who and able to plan appropriately.
Okay. Well, I would encourage every member of the board, including those who are absent right now, should be getting their eyes on all of these supporting documents and getting your input into what you feel is missing in particular, because these have to be very complete documents to make it through the full process. At the federal level, it is like pulling teeth, hen's teeth. Does anybody have anything? Thanks, Bill. Ian.
Just a couple of points. Well, one point. I was going to ask this question earlier, but actually most of it's been answered, and I congratulate the staff for what they've done, because I didn't think they would be that far advanced, and that's great. And I think it's also important, as you said, that if any of these areas are attributable to any input that any of the members have, that would be good. But have to be done in the sense that we got to get some of the rough draft documents to look at if we're interested. So as I think what you were saying is that if we contact Bill and say we're interested in providing, cursory overview or something, that would be the process to do, right?
Yes, I think so. And chairing this board, clearly I've shown a great deal of interest, and I want to see it all, and I want to have a chance to offer some comments and help on every document on this. So We have to get this, I think, a lot earlier than the week prior to the 12th of November, though. I think the week prior to 12 November should be the time that you're polishing up the language and the formatting. But in terms of the content and that, I think in the next 2 weeks we really got to push hard to get the content to the 85-90% level in short order here. I mean, by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, we should be satisfied that we're on target, and that means, you know, you guys got to be able to put some input into this in the next couple of weeks. Comments? Gallery? Doable? Achievable?
We're on it.
Awesome. What I like to hear. Okay. Okay, we're on to the communications update. Chris, do you want to talk about the letter of support, or do you want to ask Matt to speak?
If I could get Matt just to come forward, just to give a brief overview of what's been planned in terms of letters of support. Thanks, Matt.
I've seen this face. You can turn the lights back down if you want. No, I'm kidding. So we've had conversations with a couple of you, and I think at your last meeting, you had discussed the idea of seeking out letters of support, and of course, a common approach to that with something like this is the use of form letters amongst community agencies and groups. So, you know, a batch of similar letters going to the province, expressing support for a project like this. We've come to learn through the province that may not be the best approach in this particular case. So, long story short, we've put together and are currently refining a bit of a high-level plan for reaching out to community groups and key stakeholders for unique letters of support that they would direct to us that we can include with our package, our application package. So that means distributing a draft note from Mayor Chop to groups like the hospital, to groups like the user groups that you all had contacted for your survey earlier in the year, sports groups and clubs and other key players in the community, asking them to show their support for the project in a unique letter, not one that everybody else is using, and encourage them to explain why this project would be so important to their particular group or the people that they represent. So we're working on a distribution plan for that. Would include that letter from the mayor. We'd start with the core 80 or so groups that are included in the in Norfolk Rec Guide. So your baseball clubs and your hockey teams and things like that. We've asked Health and Social Services to put together their list of social agencies and other groups like that. We'll work with our partners in economic development and tourism to look at the business community and make sure we reach contacts in that area, and then make that letter from the mayor available to you and to council and to others to make sure that we hit off anybody in the community that we may have missed distributing it centrally. That's in a nutshell, the plan that we're looking at. Happy to answer any questions about that or why we took that approach.
Amy.
Thank you. Through the chair to you, Matt. So if a community member expresses interest to an RFAB member about writing a letter of support, what's your preferred direction so that we're not doubling up on letters, and where should they send the letter if it's not already being targeted? Yeah,
through the chair. So that's a good question. So, there's likely to be some people who are going to be hit up twice. It's a fairly small community here, and everybody knows each other. So that's not the end of the world, but obviously the part of the point here is to make sure that we have a bit of a central group looking at this and a professional approach to distributing the letter. So what we'd like to do is direct people to submit their letters to the general mayor's email address. So that's mayor@norfolkcounty.ca. That would be the best place for us to collect all of those submissions, and then we can include them in our application from there.
So just to be clear, we're asking for emails of support to the mayor ASAP. And my key concern right now is that 6 weeks is awfully close to get collating everything together. We need probably 2 weeks just to polish this document. So we probably only have 4 weeks to get this done. Solicitation is one thing, but feedback and making sure it happens is key. One thing that we do have in our favor is that I think just about every adult is going to be going out to vote. Is there a way that we can harness that to help remind people or collect letters of support at that? I don't know what the legalities of that are, but is that a possibility?
Yeah, to the chair, it's a good thought. We've had some discussions around what general public engagement might look like, and I think the general consensus right now is that we really want to make sure, of course, we want to cast a large net and include the wide range of support that we know we have in the community. We do, though, want to be careful that we put some focus on key stakeholders in the community and make sure that those are the people we get those letters of support from. So we're just having some discussions now about, at the moment, reaching out to those key groups and then thinking about what a larger public engagement campaign might look like and what the risks and benefits to all of that might be. So that's sort of where we are in our thinking right now.
Okay. So you are going to follow up with those key stakeholders to make sure that they do their homework and submit it on time.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think the ideal letter for us is, a key stakeholder in our community sending us a letter on their official letterhead, signed by their leadership, and outlining specifically why this project is important to their group or their particular audience. I think that is, the ideal template for us, and looking at the groups we have in the community, I know we'll get a good deal of those. So looking forward to seeing them roll in.
Have you got a sample on the website or somewhere accessible so that groups can get a little inspiration?
Of the letter itself?
Yeah.
No, we're still working on it right now, so it's in draft form. But
okay.
But that's what we would do is put that together and then make that available to people like this group and council to give them that inspiration and
I think
get
a
the word
template
out.
will help, just so that people aren't under the impression they have to write War and Peace or something like that. For
That's
them.
right.
Amy.
Are service clubs included on your group list that you plan to tackle? I know we've got user groups.
Yeah, I will confirm that, but I believe they are. And again, that 80 or so member list that we currently have is just the beginnings of that list. It's what we pulled from the community guide. But in addition to that, we would add anybody who's not there. So the social services agencies that Health and Social Services works with, or the business community, and et cetera.
JJ.
Yes, through the chair, I just wanted to make mention that the Haldeman Norfolk Housing Authority has expressed a great deal of support for this project in the past. I'm sure that through Health and Social Services they're probably on your list, but I just wouldn't want to see them missed.
Through the chair, I believe they are, but we'll make sure that they're included, absolutely.
And what is the submission deadline that you've set for this?
So for the moment, we've mocked in, I think it's the end of the weekend just before our application deadline, which is November 10th, I believe, which would give us then the next day and a bit to get all those letters put together and submitted as part of our application.
Are we planning to submit it on the 12th, or are we planning to submit it a week or so early? I heard a couple of different ideas there. What's the overall plan here?
So I think our plan is to target November the 4th as a first final draft, not the final draft, but a first final draft. That will be full circulation around here, looking for errors, omissions, things that may not be as compelling, and giving ourselves enough time to refine and revise anything in the application between the 4th and the 12th. And so we have the letters. We'll probably have to close off by probably the 10th, just to collate and have it, in a polished form. So we'd like to get them as early as possible, but we will have to have a cutoff at some point for the collating.
Okay. While we're on that subject, I guess that brings up another point. Is the submission all electronic?
Through the chair, I believe we have the option to submit it electronically. I thought it was by email. Okay, that's my mistake. So we will have a hard copy submission then. So we'll have to have a hard copy then.
Keep in mind, they probably want a digital copy, maybe not via email, but they probably want a digital copy for all those references and things too. Okay. So we've got the deadline. We've talked about the distribution method, and the template is dead. We're just going to get every member. Can you just go through again what the people want to say? Like why this is important is clear. You know, what the best outcome for their particular organization, you know, and what might happen to their organization if they don't see this. Those, to me, sound like good things, but do you have anything else that you want?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, certainly this group is more than familiar with our key message around this project. This facility is accessible to all, that it's going to grow with the community, it's going to serve the entirety of Norfolk County. You know, all of those things are key for all of our community groups. And then each of them are going to have some, you know, hopefully going to have some unique perspective on what it means to them. You know, if you look at social services agencies, they represent a different group than perhaps a user group, and a seniors group is going to have something a little bit different than a youth group. So I think they can each put their spin on those key messages. But yeah, it's exactly the sorts of things that you mentioned, and I think that's really the power in this approach to these sorts of letters is getting that unique perspective from each of these groups. That'll really have some sway in a application like this.
Okay. Thank you. Any final questions for Matt? Terrific. Thank you. Anything on comms in general? All right. JJ, you're up for the requirements update.
Yes, first, just a little follow-up from our last meeting. We did get together with county staff, Bill and Shelley, to discuss you know, possible insurance requirements for a project such as this, and it seems that they're well ahead of the game in having all those insurance requirements covered. And I look forward to getting together in the very near future to help in whatever way we can through the requirements subcommittee in identifying key elements for the project.
Okay. Have we got a plan for you know, when you want to do that, or
I'd like to do it sooner rather than later, as I already expressed. So I think you know, through the CAO, that if we could arrange that meeting in the very near future, happy to help.
in terms of the requirements, have we done an analysis on comparable facilities per person in these other communities? Like, have we looked at the number of arenas that Brantford or Cambridge have based on their population, and tried to figure out that kind of thing when we're looking at things? I know one of the key decision points that seems to get raised every meeting is whether we're going with a 50-meter pool or a 25-meter pool. I thought I came up with a fairly compelling case demographically why a 50-meter pool is important. But when we come down to things like the gender-based analysis aspect of the funding application, it just so happens swimming is the #1 sport for females in the country. So that speaks to the value of including a good pool in this submission. Have we kind of rounded out our requirements that way and taken a look at numbers and the demographics?
There has been some demographics that have, swayed our past requirements list. development, but not to the extent that you're talking about, I think. And I see that, you know, the growth demographics is a big part of the application process itself. So I definitely think that's something to work delving into further.
Okay. And that kind of rounding out the entire application is one of the reasons I'd like to see the application sooner than later, is so that we can try and find those little outlier justifications and try and refine what we're asking for. To that end, before I ask for other comments on the requirements, the point was raised to me when I saw the 125,000 square foot number for the $50 million application. You know, just extending a square footage argument there, 150,000 square foot would be a $60 million project. Has council had any limits on the size financially of what we're looking at? Are we restricting ourselves to a one-third participation, or you know, because this particular funding application is not a one-third. I think our portion is what, 26% or something. That gives us a little leeway to say, okay, well, if it's 50 million, 26% of that, then if we were planning a one-third, you know, we need to reconsider, you know, how much are we willing to spend on this project? Has council given any consideration to the overall county portion of the value in dollars and cents? Amy?
Through the chair, I believe the direction that council will head is we'll go into this workshop and we will identify what needs to go into the facility, and then build on that or subtract from that, from Mr. McQueen's comments about knowing what square foot the dollar value is on admin space versus an aquatic center. It's really going to change what our facility could look like. So from my understanding, the plan will be, we will tackle that once we go into a workshop and narrow down a couple different builds that we're comfortable with. In my mind, I know that we have funds budgeted for repairs and we need a few things. So I think once we can build something and put a dollar value and an appropriate square foot on it, then we can make that decision a little bit more. Tough to say when we haven't started a conversation about fundraising either, but we certainly know what we need as a bare minimum, funding or not, whether we receive funding from the provincial or federal government or not. So I think it's kind of a skirted around that question specifically. I think after we finish this workshop, we'll be able to have a good conversation about what the county goes forward with financially.
I agree with you, and you know, we haven't factored in the fundraising amounts from private donors. We haven't factored in, you know, that the value in having, you know, on the application, the gender-based analysis, taking a prime aspect of the application at the federal level. It may not have as much impact at the provincial level, but I know at the federal level, it's going to be a key deciding factor between Upper Rubber Boot and Norfolk County's applications. So we do have to make sure that that's considered. I guess to Amy's point, I guess this workshop to work on the requirements is going to have to happen very, very soon, so that we can hash out multiple options and work through this. Do we have any ideas how we're going to handle this workshop? Chris, sorry.
So through the chair, I'm just going to back up to your earlier question. The Norfolk County Council is going into the capital budget process, and one of the directions that council's provided is they would like to see more of a 10-year sustainable capital budget plan. And so that's one of the things that will come forward late October to talk about the overall capital budget. It fits into the asset management plan discussion, which we are going to have to demonstrate that this facility is part of an asset management plan for Norfolk County. We'll have to look at some assets that may be left as a result of consolidating into a new facility. And so we have to go through that process. What Councillor Martin referred to was some of the costs that we have in our 10-year capital plan currently for facilities that are providing these services will require some substantial investments for rehabilitation, renovation, or retrofit if we were moving forward with those same facilities. And so we have to do that offsetting math. And that, I think, will help to inform the discussion around whether 50 million is the right number, whether it's a lower number or a higher number based on a number of other implications of an investment this big for Norfolk County. So whether it's debt-related or debt servicing costs versus the offset versus some repurposing of those other assets that we might move from. So a lot of considerations, and I think what Council's looking for is a more sustainable financial plan around capital assets, and that will come forward to help to inform the workshops, and we are working on that now. So that will be coming forward later this month, and so the scoping around that will have at least some guidance around what that looks like in terms of affordability for council, for if there is some variation from a submission over and above 50 million.
Okay, so our asset management plan is going to be updated to that 2017 standard, is that right?
Through the chair, there are requirements for our submission for the asset management plan. It'll be largely around the recreational facilities, and so we've isolated that part of the asset management plan. Okay. There are requirements for the asset management plan for the whole county to be up to speed, but it's a later date, and it may not be as relevant to this application, but certainly relevant in our 10-year capital plan, but not specific to this application.
Okay. What about the disposal of those soon-to-be redundant assets? That is going to be some value. That's going to offer us some value that could, over and above this $50 million application, help us, swallow the idea of maybe a $60 million facility or a $70 million or a 52, whatever it might be. Have we started looking at the value of those assets that we will be disposing of?
I can't speak specifically to the asset values that we've disposed of, but I'll just take a quick scan around the room. If someone else has some of that information, I think it would be part of the asset management plan in terms of what those assets are and what the investment requirements are. I think we've not had a fulsome discussion around what would the disposition be. So we have a bunch of different options, and I think it'll be largely driven by what is the demand in the community. So if we are to reestablish 2 facilities in a new facility, do we have enough demand for those legacy facilities to continue to operate, or would we be automatically looking to transfer those services entirely over to the new facility? I don't believe we've got a solid answer in terms of what the disposition will be, but we do know from an asset management perspective, we do need to figure out a disposition for those assets that will serve the community in a positive way, or dispose of them in a positive way so they're repurposed for community benefit. And that'll be important in the application.
Well, just for clarity, I will state, it's always been my understanding that the existing senior center, the Annalise Carr Aquatic Center, and Talbot Gardens and the hockey arena were not going to be used for those purposes anymore if we build this new facility. Does anybody have any other concept? Ian?
That was my understanding as well, Mr. Chair, that eventually we'd be phasing out these antiquated facilities that are on a Band-Aid type solution. But we were of the opinion that we weren't going to have those go out of service before a new facility were to be built. So keeping in mind that we need to provide a service level to our residents while we were constructing this new facility, and that they would not be sort of mothballed until we had a comparable facility or a better facility to be used. So in the interim, yes, we're looking at continuing with some of those Band-Aid type repairs so we can still maintain our service levels, to those user groups and to those residents that use them, not necessarily on an ongoing basis, but for those once-off costs. And we want to make sure that we're still providing those types of recreation and leisure activities for our residents. So with that in mind, we haven't gotten into much of the project plan for what phases are going to be completed first. When is the pool going to be have a ribbon cutting, for example, or when are we going to be able to have the first hockey team hit that ice pad? And until we have some of those answers in place, it's a little premature to say, which of these facilities would be perhaps going up for sale or would be potentially retrofitted. I don't know if we can move some of the stuff that's in that building. I imagine that transporting a Zamboni would be a lot easier than moving an HVAC system, for example. So when we start getting into our asset management plan about what we're looking to replace, what we're looking to repair, I think we'll get some more answers in terms of what that looks like, disposing of those legacy assets. And that seems to be the next bullet point on our agenda here. I don't know if we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I would love to continue that conversation, because that's always been my impression going into this, is that we're looking at replacing aging infrastructure here in Simcoe. And I think that's allowed many of our residents outside of the Simcoe area, they understand that this isn't a brand new facility for Simcoe. This is a Norfolk County asset that's going to be replacing some aging infrastructure here in Simcoe, and it's allowed for some greater buy-in, I feel, throughout Norfolk County, that all Norfolk approach, understanding that we're being responsible with the assets that we have, the finances that we have in place to provide recreation and leisure activities in our community, and that ultimately this is going to be replacing that aging infrastructure. So that was always my interpretation going in. Again, I'm one vote on council, and I'm one board member in this committee. And if anyone is objecting to what I've put forward just now, I would say speak up. But that's been sort of the general consensus I felt from council as well, is that we're looking at, really replacing infrastructure here in Simcoe with a brand new facility that we can be proud of. I want to say the repairs long-term out, it's like $12-15 million to keep what we have. And honestly, we wouldn't have much to show for that other than the service levels that we enjoy to date. There may be more costs down the road. That's just in the short term from my perspective. So for a fraction of that cost, we can have, for a fraction of that cost more, not quite double, but close to it, we could have a brand new facility that we can be really proud of here in Norfolk.
Well, and that was the reason I brought it up, and I wanted to make sure that we were on the record as providing that clarity, is that the existing facilities are assets to be disposed of at a profit, or not profit necessarily, but we're going to get some cash for them out of some means. And I think when we're factoring in the overall cost of our facility, we need to go, okay, we got 50 million, of which we're paying 26.6% or something in that order. And then we've got the cost of the O&M for that, the figure that you quoted there. I understand that's just for the next decade of service for the existing facilities. So if we're building a new facility, we're building something for 50, 60, 70 years worth of use. And any doubters can just take a look at the Wayne Gretzky Center that's now passing over 45 years old. And, it looks pretty state-of-the-art in there. So, if we build it right, we're talking a half a century of use out of a facility that is going to cost us a fraction more than the O&M to keep our aging facilities for a decade. So I just want to kind of bring the subject back around to that 50 million and say 50 million is a bare bones baseline in my perspective. I'm going to have to hear some pretty convincing arguments why 50 million is it, or 125,000 square feet is all we can afford at this point. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First argument is the program is capped at 50 million. put in an application higher than that, they just throw it away. So I don't even know why you're looking at something other than that. I also don't know why you're looking at what the county will do with its assets after the fact, and then we can spend more because we'll get some money back. Stay in your lane and do what we ask, because there is not even full support around the council table. I'd be willing to bet if you took a vote this week on whether we build RFAB or not, it would lose. There is one councillor off on a little time off, and a tie vote loses, right? So the more compelling argument is, why do we need it? And convince the entire west two-thirds of the county that it needs to be there. It's a good business model. It's all those things. And the timeline is very tight here. We have a council meeting in 2 weeks. If there's any approvals you need on anything for council, it has to be before that council, at that council meeting in 2 weeks. Otherwise, we miss the window of opportunity to apply that. So I think it's time to actually get down, get that application filled out. It's going to be so wide and $50 million long, or else it's not going to be acceptable to that program. And, you know, I've talked to the deputy mayor about this before. We have to make it fit into that. Make sure you build it in such a place that, okay, the plans are going to include down the road. Don't build it up against the fence or against the property line, because potentially down the road we can add this and we can add that and we can add that. But this original concept has to be $50 million, 125,000 square feet is about right. You know, let's make those decisions on whether you want a 25-meter pool, a 50-meter pool. Get that in front of council sometime in October, so that council is going to be able to decide whether they can fully support that application. And I was even, we have council, we have the budget committee is meeting, which is all of council, on the 29th. So potentially we can call a special council meeting for an hour ahead of that, because all the councilors are going to be there anyway. Or we have CNC on the 5th of November, that we could call a special council meeting an hour ahead of that as well. But at one of those meetings, there better be something with a nice picture to say, this is what we're actually asking for.
Well, I appreciate that. I will clarify, though, the funding application is capped at $50 million. But the funding application also says that, you know, applicants, not counties, not individuals or organizations, but applicants can add it on to their own stuff. It's just the funding application for the $50 million has restrictions on what it can be used for and what it cannot be used for. But it does not cap the entire project. So I know that politically there may be, there's value in capping it, but we were not, we didn't start this out as a goal to cap it within the 50 million. We started out with a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 concept. And because we're only looking at 26% of 50 million now, the question arises, are we willing to go with 52, 54, 60? What is the overall council limit? And I do think we need to have a little more guidance from council on this. We don't have to have it today, but you know, we should be able to come up with our requirements in short order and provide council with some recommendations for what is going to be in this facility.
And I think that's what I'm suggesting. If, when you start doing the square footages on a pool, on the senior portion, on the pad, and the best you can do is going to come in at 52 million. Okay, well, we apply under that 50 million program, make sure it's filled out properly, but you're going to have to come to council and say, we're going to be 2 million over just to get that. Otherwise, we have to cut something. But right now, council basically, we don't know what it is we're talking about. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know how we're going to get there. And before November 12th, we better have all of those questions answered. And, you know, like I heard you talking before about, you've made the argument about the length of the pool. Why I'm sure you want to have the bigger one because it makes more sense, but there is a logical argument to that. But those arguments better be made to council Because again, I would like to see, a unanimous vote in support of this project around that council table. And we're not there yet because nobody really knows, everybody's, the ones who've been supporting it are supporting it from inside, from the heart, rather than from the figures. And the ones who are opposing it are looking at figures and they haven't got the heart and soul into it, and geography has something to say about that. So let's give them something that they can look at and say, the business model works, the functionality of the proposed areas, different elements works. Maybe we can get the support unanimously across the county. So.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate all the input, and I'm always willing to debate with any councillor or any member of this county the merits of this. But, we can't do it all night here. JJ's got some guitar lessons he's got to teach. Gord.
Sorry, just to continue that conversation, I think it does exactly those requests fall in line with the actions that we've been talking about taking. First, with regards to the requirements meetings, figuring out what can we get for what dollars, put that against the priorities that the community has expressed, see what do we get for 50 million, what do we get for 52, what difference is that to the community, which also falls in line, I look down this list of appendices, the business case for the project, the growth dynamics, the asset management plan. That case not only has to be sold to our council, but our community and the Ontario and federal governments. So it does all have to come in to make sense for the community, both in terms of needs, resources, and also dollars and cents. So I think we're at the beginning of a 6-week project that has to move very, very quickly. But those seem like the steps that we're going to take to answer those questions.
So again, back to Amy's working group concept, I think we have to be able to sit down on this working group in the next 2 weeks and hammer out the list of things that we can afford for X amount of dollars and come up with a number of variables for X that or figures for that variable X, and try and present them with 2 or 3, at least 3 options of what we're going to get for our money here. JJ.
Yeah, through the chair, I like the comments made by Gordon and that compelling argument that we come up with, to bring to council. I think that same compelling argument we should be prepared to take out on the road and across this county, and to all the citizens out there that are going to be looking at possibly the bill for this, and most definitely a bill for this project, and so I think that's a key important to us in the future that we start to look at that. The other thing is, I see time after time we have disposal benefits of legacy facilities, and the option for repurposing should, I think, always be included in those little agenda headings, because I don't think that we should necessarily be talking about just disposal, outright disposal, but if there's a brilliant idea for repurposing a facility, I think that's something that we should be taking into consideration or making recommendation to council about.
Gord.
Just to follow up on JJ's comment, a meeting or two ago, we talked specifically about this and doing a tour, opening up to the public to go and see these different properties for both purposes, to have people look at it from an disposal acquisition perspective to see what interest there is, and also for community engagement on possible repurposing plans. So I think as we get closer to this application and you look at the budgetary aspects to it, there's going to have to just be assumptions made with regards to overall fundraising goals, because depending upon which way we go with any particular facility, there may or may not be dollars to offset the new hub, versus also just general fundraising. Look at similar size facilities, what do communities raise, and come up with a target. And these are going to be assumptions. It's not going to be perfect based on which way we go. So to JJ's point, yes, I know that is a plan to tour these facilities. I think staff has enough in the next 6 weeks on their plate. And also from a public perspective, I think we need a few more announcements that get us a few steps closer before I think there's real buy-in that, yes, this is happening. Let's really engage on the legacy assets that we need to repurpose or sell.
I think you know, I wrote down disposal benefits and that made it onto the agenda, but really what I was getting in is what's the value of the existing facilities? What value do they have socially, economically, that kind of thing? So, you know, that consideration should be made. You know, if we can turn them into something fabulous for the county that is completely outside of a recreational stream, then, you know, that money or that value should be considered when you're talking about the recreational facility. That was the point I was trying to get with this this particular bullet. But this is the last bullet, and Ian, you wanted to revisit this this particular item tonight. Do you have anything more to add on this subject at this point? No? Okay. Does anybody have anything more to discuss on this? It's actually much more discussion than I intended on this. Well, page 2 is the adjournment. So unless we have any pressing matters to throw out. Ian.
Mr. Chairman, clarification, from Councillor Martin perhaps. The workshop they referred to, when is that being held, or is it an ongoing process?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, we don't have a date yet, but we do know that it's going to be in relatively short order. It just depends on how soon we can assemble the information that will be necessary for that discussion to happen. So I would suspect it'll be probably the following week. And we'd like to the extent we can, combine it with, for the council portion of it. So I think we would have the RFAB group preempt the council meeting, have the discussion with the RFAB group, come up with some options for council to consider, and then we'd position it potentially on the agenda for October 15th. We just need to confirm that we'll have all the information that you need to have that discussion. So once we confirm that, then we'll be able to confirm those dates. So we'll get that out as soon as possible.
Okay, so Chris will take on the working group date setting, and we'll try and pass that information to everybody here ASAP. Right.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and just through you to Chris. Is there anything coming up right now that you think will need, you know, what we find in the application 2 weeks from now, that this board should be giving some direction that'll come to council in 3 weeks? Or right now, are we in a pretty good spot? Because there hasn't been any direction coming out of this meeting, and with the timelines there, I'm just wondering if there's anything you see in the near future that you're going to need direction on.
So if I understand correctly, the direction from this group was that there was going to be like a two-way communication here. So if there are members of RFAB who feel that elements that we've identified tonight, they can add some value to in whatever way that might be, to reach out to Bill and make sure they're engaged properly as soon as possible. And the flip side for us is, as we're going through to look at professional support services, if there are those subject matter experts around the table here, we will be reaching out as well to engage people around this table. So we'll move forward with that, and if there's anything else we need, we can certainly communicate through the chair or through Councillor Martin to make that happen.
I think until we actually get eyes on the funding application and have an announcement over the site, we're kind of limited on what else we can advise at this point. Sue.
I guess my concern is that if we're going to be meeting in the next 2 weeks or so, is picking a date tentatively, because I'm looking at the calendar and I'm looking at Thanksgiving Monday is a holiday, and I know people are, and I'm just kind of looking at other people around the table have outside jobs, that's why.
So through the chair, we'll take a look at that, because I know that was one of the concerns we had just in terms of time frames, a couple of short weeks there, and then the availability of people who are working during the day. So trying to accommodate people as best we can. So we'll certainly take a look at that and try to accommodate schedules to the best of our ability.
Yeah, a lot of these files, back to the transportation mechanism of these files could be emailed securely to and from I don't think it's that high security an issue that we can't do it remotely if needed. I know I'm in Atlanta all next week, so I'm going to have to work remote. Final comment? Can I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn today's meeting? JJ and Sue. Discussion? All in favor? Ian noted late hand. Carried. The next official meeting is Monday, November 4th at 3:30 p.m. And thank you very much, members of the Peanut Gallery. Thanks. Well,